Hello, welcome to my channel and welcome back to my Axial Yeti upgrade series. Now today we're going to take a look at the rear axle of the Axial Yeti. As you may know, the Axial Yeti has an off-center pumpkin design, which means that the pumpkin or the differential is not in the middle, it's just off of center, and in this case off to the left. I will be replacing this axle with this SSD HD60 centered rear axle, and with this the pumpkin is exactly in the middle. And the other thing that we need to know is that the Axial Yeti actually uses the Axial AR60 axle, and the problem with that is the Yeti, the front of the Yeti with the arms here is wider than the AR60 axle. So what happens is Axial uses these longer hub adapters to push out the width of the wheel, or the width of the axle, and that puts more stress on the axle shaft. The SSD part is basically the same width as the AR60s, but SSD does come with a wide rear axle conversion kit for the Yeti. You can see right here. And what this will allow you to do is this will allow you to get rid of these larger hub adapters and allow you to use just regular wheels. So the front and the rear is going to be exactly the same. Alright, let's get this started. Alright, I've got the Axial AR60 off the Yeti, and basically this is what I was talking to you about. The AR60's axle in the rear is not as wide as the Yeti up front, and so it requires these adapters for the wheels. Usually what you would do when using the AR60 and you want to widen the axle in order to mount regular wheels without having to use this adapter, you would have to get the Axial AR60 widening kit, and basically that comes with longer lockouts. See there, it pushes it out. That way you can use regular hex adapters like the front, and that gives you more options of wheels to use. And basically that's how it works right there. So this is what you would use if you want to widen the AR60 axle. Let's take a look at the SSD axle. So same thing with the SSD axle. If you don't use the widening kit or the SSD widening kit for this axle, you would have to do pretty much the same thing that the AR60s do, which is use this adapter here in order to mount a 6-lug wheel. But in this case, SSD does make an adapter, so much like the Axial one, it will allow you to use a regular hex adapter with the wheels. So let's go ahead and take a look at the SSD HD60 centered rear axle and compare it with the Axial AR60s. Alright. So, the SSD HD60 or HD D60 centered rear axle comes with equal length shafts because it's a centered pumpkin, and the diff cover, the truss, the link mount, set of bearings, and hardware. Now this housing does not come with the diff gears inside. That is provided by your Axial kit, so you would be taking it out of these AR60s and sticking it into this. Alright, so I've got these adapters off, and like I said, as you can see with the AR60s, on the Yeti, it's not wide enough in the rear, so they had to use this adapter and mount it on like that. And it's secured by a hex nut right there. So with the wide axle kits, basically this lockout is pushed up a little further, the shafts are a little bit longer, and so you're able to use this with any other wheel that comes out on the market. You have more options instead of having to use this. Alright, so there's the comparison, and we'll go ahead and start moving things over. Now, one thing that we do need to keep in mind as far as the rotation of the axes, on the AR60s, if I rotate the axles clockwise, as far as the wheel turning this way, I see this shaft turning counterclockwise. Now, on the SSD centered axle, the rotation is going to go in the opposite direction because of the diff gear being placed on this side rather than the other side. So in order to use this, you're going to have to flip the diff gears in the front differential on the Yeti and reverse your motor rotation in order to make it go the way you want, or in the direction that you want. So if I use this with the SSD axle housing, you're not able to just flip it over like that, which I wish you could, because then that would solve that problem. Basically because it's got these the truss mounts over on this side instead of this side right here. So using this, we will have to flip the differential gears in the front differential. Now here you can see that on the SSD the diff gear is on the opposite side, and that's why we're going to have to flip the front diff. So the SSD uses larger bearings. You can kind of see this size difference right there. Okay, you can see that we got the bearing brackets in place. And the diff gear in place as well. I just give that a little bit more grease and we'll call it good to go. As usual, I use Versachem brake caliper grease to grease the gears. Alright, we've got the diff cover on. Look how nice that looks. Just wipe a little bit of grease off that side there. Fit and finish is great. Alright, the next thing we need to do is install the shafts, and we will be using the stock bearings with the SSD shafts. We will not be using the shafts that come with the centered axle cover. We will be using these wide rear axle conversion shafts. Alright, I've got the bearings off of the old shafts. I'm pretty much gotta put them on the new wide center shafts. There we go. Alright, so we won't be using these because, like I said, we're going to be using the wide adapters. Shafts are going to be even on both sides. Alright. That's one side in. Alright, both sides are in. Alright, now we're going to want to put the truss onto the axle. Alright, now we got the truss mounted. The next step is to put the link mounts on. So we got the link mounts, and they're the same on both sides, so pretty simple. Alright, I finally finished the SSD HD60 centered rear axle with the winding kit. I finally figured out what those washers were for. They came with the winding kit for the SSD axle, so I've added them in on each side. And so here's a comparison with the SSD HD60 centered axle and the Axial AR60 axle. And there you go. See here where the pumpkin is in the middle. This one's on the left. The winding kit here makes it wider. With the Axial AR60, without the winding kit, you would have to use these adapters to get it out wide. And the SSD HD60 axles actually come with these end caps. But of course, like I said, I bought the winding kit because I'm using this on the Yeti. Alright, like I said, when you're using the SSD HD60 centered rear axle, the drive shaft turns in the opposite way of the Axial AR60. So in order to get both the front and the rear turning the same direction, you have to flip the diff gear in the front differential. So let's go ahead and do that. Alright. I'll be re-greasing it with my Versachem caliper grease, and basically this is what you gotta do to use this SSD. Just flip it around, and that's all there is to it. So now that it's on the other side, while I'm at it, I'm gonna grease it. Alright, put the cover back on. Now, as I said earlier, I'm replacing the axial screws with the Team K&K stainless steel screw kit. So these are 3x12 countersunk screws. Just a reminder of what screws I'm using. Team K&K stainless hardware kit for the Yeti. Alright, so the front diff is flipped and it should work with the SSD centered rear axle. Thanks for watching.